and as we find out the result of that court process. Thanks for that. We're going to talk about a lot wider issues with our next guest, the Environment and Energy Minister, Josh Frydenberg. He joins us live from Canberra. Thanks for your company. We might as well start on this, though, before we get into the big, meaty policy issues in your portfolio. Is Chris Bowen, the Shadow Treasurer, right when he says that the government wouldn't be interested in these matters that Michaelia Cash referred to the relevant commission if Bill Shorten wasn't the opposition leader?
No, he's wrong, because we're interested in the law being upheld by all citizens, whether they're the leader of the opposition or whether they're a person who's not even in the parliament. The truth is there are serious allegations here about donations and whether they were made with the proper authorisation. The registered organisations and the AFP are both involved in this. Completely independent of government.
I don't doubt that,
integrity
Minister.
and their professionalism shouldn't be maligned.
And I'm certainly not going to do that. The Registered Organisation Commission, whether the opposition chooses to agree or disagree with its establishment, it's an independent statutory body. Its chair comes from the senior ranks of ASIC before moving into this role. And as you say, the AFP certainly shouldn't be maligned. But do you honestly think that Michaelia Cash, the Workplace Relations Minister, would have referred this matter concerning Bill Shorten to the Commission if he wasn't in politics?
Well, we've seen, for example, the Royal Commission look into the behaviour of a whole lot of people who aren't involved in politics. And, you know, this is just part of a broader focus on upholding the rule of law. The Labor Party is seeking to muddy the waters from an issue which is very important to the public, namely that they see the law upheld by everybody and that they see the unions behave in accordance of the community values that we all accept. But obviously members of the union movement do not. And that is why, for example, the CFMEU have nearly 80 of its members up in the courts on nearly 900 different alleged breaches of the law. That's why we've seen more than $10 million in fines coming the way of the union movement. These are clearly lawbreakers who have refused to accept the norms of society which each and every one of us adhere to and accept.
Just finally on this issue, if the court case being brought to try to render these raids unlawful is lost by the Registered Organisation Commission and it's found to have acted unlawfully, do you have to revisit the legislation? I mean, there has to be repercussions then, surely.
Well, the law as it is and the Registered Organisation legislation is as it is. We obviously got this through the Parliament.
But if they've acted unlawfully, if they're found to have acted unlawfully, heads must roll, surely.
You're just speculating.
No, I'm not. I'm asking the question. Do you agree with me?
You're speculating.
That if the court case finds that there was an unlawful raid, heads have got to roll. I mean, that's common sense, isn't it?
Well, look, the law is what it is, and obviously that is what the Registered Organisations Commission are acting upon, and that's what the Federal Police are seeking to uphold. So let it play itself out, but let's also hear from Bill Shorten his personal explanation.
All right, let's get on to your portfolio. Treasury has today joined the Energy and Climate Change Authority, confirming that no modelling was done ahead of the announcement around energy in your policy space last week. Is that a concern? I mean, should people be concerned that after 5 years in government, after 8 months to consider the Finkel review, we get an 8-page document or whatever it was with no modelling?
Well, let's actually look at what's happened here. The government has spoken to the experts, the most preeminent body of energy experts in the country, namely the Energy Security Board, made up of an independent chair and deputy chair and the heads of the Australian Energy Market Operator, the Australian Energy Market Commission and the Australian Energy Regulator. This is a recommendation, and this board is a recommendation out of the Finkel review. It was accepted by states at COAG, including a majority of Labor states. Now, we sought their advice and they have given us comprehensive advice about the National Energy Guarantee. Once we released that advice publicly, it has received the overwhelming endorsement by third parties of people who are focused on ending the climate wars and getting more affordable and reliable power. whether it has been the Minerals Council, the manufacturers, the meat processors, the grocers, the irrigators, the Business Council of Australia, the AIG Group, or the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Everyone has said this is a practical, workable, credible way forward. And that is why the Labor Party should get on board. That is why we're getting further modelling undertaken. That modelling will be shared with the states. Well, the analysis by the Energy Security Board has given us a sense of where the savings will be. That's put in writing of $100 to $115. That was analysis that they undertook based on a series of modelling that they had done previously in a whole range of relevant areas. So we need to get more modelling done. I've written to the Energy Security Board about that, and when that modelling is done, it will be provided to the states through the COAG process so that we can have a constructive debate at the meeting at the end of November.
You talk about process though, Minister. I mean, what about the fact that at the end of a very long inquiry and process, the Chief Scientist came up with a clean energy target, and it's a recommendation that's basically been kicked to the curb?
Well, as you know, there were 50 recommendations, and in record time we accepted 49 of those, Peter.
Can I jump in on that, though, Minister?
Important.
I mean, that's a little bit... I get that you accepted 49 of 50 recommendations, but that's a little bit like me saying to you, to get to this interview, there's 50 steps you have to take. Stand up from your desk, walk out the door, walk to the studio, ensure that you put a microphone on. The 50th step is when we have the interview, you actually talk. So if you don't actually talk, but you've done the other 49 out of 50, it's not going to be much of an interview. It's the same with the CET within the Finkelton recommendations, isn't it?
No, I think your analogies are a bit tortured today, Peter. The reality is that the National Energy Guarantee is better than the Clean Energy Target. And that is the advice from the Energy Security Board, and the Chief Scientist has said that he's pleased we sought the advice of the Energy Security Board, and he's made it clear that this is a credible mechanism, one that can provide for an orderly transition so that we can boost reliability and that we can meet our emissions reduction targets that we agreed to at Paris while reducing people's power bills. I mean, just yesterday we saw modelling that was done by the Climate Change Authority, which indicated that the Labor Party's emissions intensity scheme, which is still their policy, will lead to power bills being $200 more per average household per year between 20 and 2030. We're leaving to a saving of over $100. So that's a $300 difference
but getting practical,
between Labor's policy and ours.
Getting practical in terms of being able to implement it, the South Australian Premier Jay Weatherill last night told Lateline that he's spoken to his fellow premiers. They won't be supporting this National Energy Guarantee. What does that mean in practical terms? I understand that you don't like that and that you'll be critical of that and you'll have a debate about that. But in practical terms, if he's right and Jay Weatherill has spoken to these other premiers, they won't be backing it. What does it mean for the scheme if the premiers are opposing it? Well, I think the premiers would be best advised to wait for the modelling and wait for the discussion of the COAG Energy Council in late November. They've already received a letter from the Business Council of Australia representing over 1 million workers who say this is the most practical and workable solution. But Minister, you're not answering the question. I understand that's your argument, and I understand you'll robustly try to convince them of otherwise. But if they stick to their guns, and if Jay Weatherill's right, in practical terms, what does it mean for the government in terms of trying to implement this? Is it dead in the water? It's certainly not. And what we are keen to do is to discuss this plan, this policy, endorsed by the Commonwealth Government at the Energy Council meeting. And I think that this is very much in South Australia's interest to get on board. They've been calling for a national policy. They've been calling for a bipartisan approach. They've been calling for us to listen to the experts. And they know that this mechanism will offer more reliability into a state like South Australia, which has seen a tenfold increase in the volatility in that market following the closure of their last coal-fired power station, the Northern coal-fired power station. Just before I let you go, what about this Productivity Commission report that was released yesterday? It argues for a price on carbon, a single effective price on carbon, quote unquote. Does the government like the idea that the PC have put forward?
No, we don't. We have said that a national energy guarantee involves no taxes, no subsidies, no trading schemes and no carbon prices, and does offer the best way forward for a more affordable and reliable energy system. That report was completed before the National Energy Guarantee was made public, but I do point out that what the Productivity Commission did explicitly state was that the government should be listening to the experts, and particularly AEMO, AEMC and the Australian Energy Regulator. So in light of the National Energy Guarantee, in light of the fact that it was a recommendation by the experts, dare I say it, I think the Productivity Commission may have a different approach. The fact is, the Productivity Commission had also suggested that the states develop their gas resources. That is one aspect of the report that we do subscribe to. But we do believe we have the best pathway forward, the best mechanism forward on the advice of the experts, endorsed right across the community by industry, representing all sectors of the economy. It's now the time for the Labor states and the premiers and the chief ministers, as well as the Labor federal opposition, to get on board in the interests of forging a national consensus on an issue of national interest.
Minister Frydenberg, thanks for finding the time to talk to us.